Hi and welcome to the special broadcast on the social media platforms of the India Today group. Today is a very interesting day for us because we have somebody back with us who has been out there in the midst of action while we have been comfortably homing in with our loved ones. And for 64 days, this man was out there in the thick of the action, and it's not without reason that we call this gentleman here affectionately within the India Today group as General Sawant. So I'm welcoming our very own General Sawant back to the India Today group and to this special broadcast. And today, I think, Gaurav, we just want to understand what it is like to be in a life changing situation like in being in a war zone, because I don't think you would have come back the same man that you went. So am I right in saying that it's a kind of a transforming exercise to be in a war zone reporting?
It is. I mean, in the sense that this is I've covered conflict before, whether it's Kargil in 1999 or the war in Iraq in 2003, or what happened in Sierra Leone where Indian forces were a part of the UN forces in 2000, or Egypt or Libya. And in Libya, when our colleague Shivarur and I, we were covering the situation on ground, there was strafing by Colonel Gaddafi's fighter jets. So we survived strafing in Libya, where in a place called Ras Lanuf. But this was very different. This was very different because in this conflict, we were seeing this really up close. You were seeing anti-tank guided missiles in action. You were seeing tanks in action. You were seeing fighter jets in action. And over a sustained period, the India Today team, and we were amongst the first to get to Ukraine. We got there on the 17th of February, so the war hadn't started. We landed in Kiev at the Borispil airport, and the war hadn't started. So it was like, a very bustling kind of a city where people were going about with their normal lives, but this tension was there. And from that tension building up to actual war and covering that war through the past 60 odd days, it was as you very rightly pointed out, a life-altering experience, because you were not only ducking shelling and firing and strafing, you were also ducking bullets being fired at you. We were fired at on live television. So, Jakur aage sahiya maar sake na koi. We not only were able to survive that, but also report what was happening for our viewers.
Right. So, initially, when you went, Gaurav, for a couple of days, we were tracking the coverage, and we were saying everything seems to be so normal there. I mean, what's wrong with that city? It's all, everything is fine. People are in the squares and youngsters are having fun and all of that. And then suddenly it caught on, and then we started seeing you in the midst of, armor and, military and all of that. And then it really caught up with us that, oh my God, he's really in the war zone. So, tell us what, we were talking, of course, Gaurav and I have had these conversations in our, water cooler chats, and we've been talking about how it's been really impacting, the anecdotes that he has so many stories to tell, and I don't know how many we can cover right now, but, yesterday, Gaurav, you remember you were telling me about this soldier, and, how he kind of taught you a life lesson by just doing a little thing that stays with you. So tell us about that.
So when you hear of soldiers, or when you think of soldiers, you think of soldiers, guns,
yes,
and killing. And I met a soldier who said he hates to kill. He kills because that's his job as a soldier. But, we were in the trenches. Can you imagine in 21st century Europe, right? You're seeing Second World War trench warfare. Trenches dug from one end of the road, under a road to the other side, to bunkers going in. So you had this maze of trenches. We would read about it in Commando comics when we were children, right? And here I was not only looking at those trenches, but I was in those trenches with these soldiers. And, there was some insect that kind of crawled into my neck. So I took it out and I was about to kill it. And he said, no, don't kill it. And he just did, and that insect went. And I said, why not kill? He said, because every life has a right to live. And he said, we kill only to protect our motherland. We don't kill because we enjoy killing. Point one. Point two, we live in harmony with environment. How does that harmony work? He told me he talks to trees. So as a soldier, he was a part of a UAV unit, unmanned aerial vehicle. They go sometimes very close to where
The enemy line,
so in our case, for them enemy, for us, the Russians and the Ukrainians, which was again a lesson that here when I covered Kargil, we had a very clear enemy,
Yes,
Pakistan.
of course.
Here, one side was Russian, one side was Ukrainian, and we were covering both
Right.
from two ends of the story. But he said they go very close to the Russian lines, and there are times when the Russian UAVs come. So he says he hugs the tree, he talks to the tree, and requests Mother Tree to protect him. And he says he's felt it at times that he's lying on the ground and he's begging the earth, blend me. He's begging the tree, protect me. And he says that he's been protected. So I found that to be very, very impressive, the way.
It's so, I mean, at one level, it's so sad that a poet like him had to be in a warlike situation, holding weapons and trying to kill people, whereas from what you're telling me, he must have been a very, creative, poetic, loving, affectionate person. So that's
and someone who loves India. He told me so much about. I met another soldier. Incidentally, I did a story which went viral. He reads the Bhagavad Gita. He's a part of the ISKCON, Krishna consciousness, and he told me that it's the Bhagavad Gita that's actually helping him live through the war. So I met so many people. I met this lady, and this again was a story. We were amongst the first journalists to get to Bucha, and this grandmother told me how her child had died, bled to death, and they could not even bury her because there were Russian tanks and Ukrainian tanks firing at each other outside their house, and for like month plus. So they buried the child just behind their house, and every morning the mother would go and put milk and cookies and chocolate on the grave because she said my daughter is feeling cold inside.
That's like, it's heart-wrenching because, such stories, and when you think of this war from the civilian perspective, or the people of Russia or Ukraine, you just don't know what makes sense. It's just so senseless, right? So, I think this particular thing must have been like, I'm a mother, so I can imagine what would have happened there.
Seriously, no electricity, houses shattered. It was snowing when we got to Bucha. It was snowing. It was really cold. And there were bodies lying around. There were bodies of men, women, and children, combatants and non-combatants on the road. In one car, this family must have been trying to escape the shelling. And the man who was driving the car, he was dead at the wheel. The lady sitting next to him, she was dead, in the passenger seat next to him. And perhaps one or two little children, because the bodies had decayed, they were rotting. They must have been lying dead for some days in the back seat. So we did a story on that this is what the war has done on ground. We reported all of this, took those pictures, and then I met this very sweet lady, a nurse. She was living in an underground bunker for 30 days. For 10 days, she hadn't eaten anything because there was no food. And then she tried to cycle out of that battle area for 40 kilometers. She wanted to just cycle out amidst the firing and the shelling and landmines and anti-personnel mines on the road. So when we stopped her, all she wanted was if we had water or coffee or tea or anything, that would give her some energy so that she could get out of there. So whatever chocolates we had, we just shared with her. And, and then she was on her way, hopefully to a brighter future.
So tell me, Gaurav, coming back from there, do you think that this trauma is going to stay with you for some time? Because it's not so easy to let it go, right? Seeing all the visuals, they keep coming back to you. A small thing happens here, somebody gets hurt or wounded, or you see an accident, it stays with you for so long. Do you think you're carrying that trauma back, and do you think you'll have to work on it?
The PTSD, I've heard of PTSD.
Yes, from back from the war,
Yeah.
but coverage is as good as fighting, right?
So, I have a different take on it. Though I hear and read a lot about post-traumatic stress disorder. Maybe the way we've been brought up. I mean, my father's was in the army. I have family in the armed forces. We read the Bhagavad Gita at home, and my mother is a teacher. So there is so much that you learn about our Hindu philosophy, our way of life. I have never felt PTSD, whether it was covering Kargil or whether it was covering Iraq or Libya or Lebanon or the IC-814 hijack or anti-terror operations or 26/11 in Mumbai. When we entered the Taj Hotel, there were, I mean, that was very traumatic because that was happening in your own country. When you saw those bodies inside the Taj Hotel or when you saw bodies at CST, those, and that we were covering for so many days standing outside the Taj Hotel. So
Now we know why they just pack you off. Every time there is some disturbance, strife, some riot, they just pack off Gaurav Sawant, send him there, pack his bags, right?
yeah. So I guess no, our family system and our friend circle, our office. I mean, our office is actually our family, right?
Yes, of course.
So
Spend most of the time here, right?
we spend most of our time here, and so I think this is such a strong institutional support that comes your way, and the stress of the next story is so much that you don't have time for PTSD.
Welcome to the competitive world of journalism. But, I'm shifting gears a little bit and talking about the Ukraine, the people of Ukraine, they seem to be a very sturdy lot, they seem to have shown so much of resilience even in the difficult and with all the odds against them. I see how people are, the soldiers and how the people are really reacting and how they're holding on to their ground. That's a very difficult thing to do against such odds, don't you think?
Well, stacked against all odds. Was this war inevitable? But that's my personal view, right? We'll discuss that maybe sometimes, that maybe negotiations should have continued and should have worked longer. But yes, amongst the strongest people I know, love their nation. Whether they love their president or not is a separate story, but they stand by his decision.
Right.
Every Ukrainian individual I spoke to, man, woman, or child, and we spoke to children, even in parts that are considered very close to Russia, these people said, no way can you violate territorial integrity of a country. We were in Kharkiv, we were in Mariupol, in places like Mariupol where we literally escaped. You remember,
Yes.
I'd done a story that 13 hours we were trapped inside a train.
That's
we
right.
couldn't move.
Yeah.
Then that afternoon we went to this lady's house, who wanted to get out of there, and her driver didn't show up. So I drove her
drove,
car,
yes.
from Mariupol to Dnipro. That Dnipro is under attack now, and we went back to Dnipro later also. But that lady or the other lady that I spoke to in Mariupol, I mean, the way they look at life, that we're in a situation, we are trapped, we'll try to make the best out of it, but we will protect our country. So that is one attitude about the people of Ukraine, which is creditable, sturdy, hardy, willing to fight to the last human being and last bullet.
And now again shifting gears and getting on to the political and the more war conversation that we've been hearing for such a long time. Do you think that it's only going to escalate from here? Do you think that you see any end, or do you think there'll be more blocks getting created and there'll be more intervention by other nations, and this is going to pan into a larger disturbance?
So this will escalate. There is no denying the fact that Russia has an aim, the United States has an aim, and these are two superpowers fighting each other.
Right, they're on two sides of the story, which is what makes all the difference, right?
And Ukraine's caught in between.
Yeah.
So Ukraine is fighting, in a way, its war to defend itself, and it's fighting America's war or NATO's war to contain Russia.
Right.
So that's what's happening on ground. And when superpowers fight, and we've seen this, I mean, those who don't learn from history are condemned to repeat it, and that's exactly what the world is doing right now. If I look at it from the Indian perspective, the real threat is China.
Yes.
Right? The US and democracies across the world need to focus on China. That's the real threat.
Right.
But somehow the situation is that China will come out on top of the situation, and we're pushing Russia closer into China's lap.
Right.
That doesn't help the US, that doesn't help India, that doesn't help any democracy across the world.
Right.
But that's exactly what is happening.
But India is finding itself in a very difficult position given the business linkages with Russia and, of course, our emotional support for Ukraine in that sense, it being the underdog in a way, and Russia being our trade partner, and we have very good. It's a bit of a precarious situation for India. So, do you think it's going to continue its non-aligned stance, or do you think at some point in time we will have to take a stance?
So my again personal view, India's stance is perfect. Russia is a partner, a strategic partner that stood with us in difficult times. Look at the 71 war.
Yes.
71 war, not only did we have an alliance with Russia, but to ensure that China doesn't attack us, there are reports that say that Russia had 2 divisions parked on the China border. 2 divisions at the China border to ensure China doesn't mess around with us. And then their fleet came challenging the American 7th Fleet. So, and the weapons supply in Kargil war, that we were covering, there was a situation, there was a time when the armed forces felt they may need to escalate, and open up a second front. Fortunately, that didn't happen. But for that, we needed tanks, new tanks, and T-90s. The Russians gave us tanks when we needed those tanks. So Russia has been a friend in need, but right now that equation is changing. Russia's dependence on China will only grow. The way America is weaponizing the dollar,
Yes.
the way Russia is out of that system. Now, the moment Russia works on a RMB, 1 ruble system or the rupee ruble system. Now, this is a sword that's going to hit both ways, but Russia's dependence on China will increase for little things. I read a report this morning that was talking about Russia wanting food packets from China for its soldiers, or unmanned aerial vehicles from China, more military hardware from China. What does that mean?
That would be a very dangerous alliance for the global.
And yet
world
that is
order.
what that is what America is doing. I mean, and why are they doing this? What is their bigger game plan? They're clearly not containing China, which needs to be contained, and that's not just India's interest.
It's a
You have Quad because the world realizes China is a threat.
Right.
But let's see how this pans out. So far, India's stance has been this is a war that Ukraine and Russia need to sort out by talking to each other and
Yes.
not talking at
At
each
each
other. To take America's interests forward. That is something that needs to be very clear.
True. So tell me, Gaurav, I've always been very curious. I was looking at that friendly exchange between you and your wife, and you kind of reassuring your family from there. But did at any point in time it feel like, oh my God, am I ever going to return home and see my loved ones again? Were there moments? Was there a moment?
So, once when we were being shot at, when we were coming out of Mariupol, and here we were driving, and there you don't know who's friend, who's foe. Because you're neither Russian nor Ukrainian. We don't speak the language. The lady, so I was driving a left-hand drive vehicle. This lady sitting next to me, all of us trying to get out of there. The camera person behind us, Rajesh Pawar, our contributor, again behind us, and he was filming. So both cameramen filming, and suddenly they filmed a checkpost, and they're paranoid about checkposts being filmed. Now, we didn't know whether this was a Russian checkpost or a Ukrainian checkpost or mercenary forces that are operating in that area. And suddenly in the side view mirror, I see a gun come up and tuck, tuck, tuck. So instinctively, you just step on the gas and swerve. And we just swerved and we just kept going and we just dashed out of that area. So that day we were very lucky we survived. Another time we were very lucky we survived is we were coming back from Dnipro to Kiev. We took a wrong turn. And beautiful road to Poltava. It's a, Ukraine is the food basket of Europe. So beautiful wheat basket. So, wheat fields all across and green fields, wide roads. And we were in a very comfortable Jeep that I was driving, and we were driving non-stop, and suddenly I noticed we've been driving for an hour, not another vehicle, not on this side and not on that side. And we are zipping at almost 150, 160 kilometers per hour. And I told the cameraman, यार कुछ गड़बड़ है, ये हो नहीं सकता कि हमारे इस सड़क पे और कोई नहीं है. So he said, नहीं, जनसंख्या कम है इस देश की. I said, इतनी भी कम नहीं है यार कि 2-1 घंटे में कोई ना मिले. So, but there was no one you could talk to. Now it so happens, we were following Google directions, right? Because there's no one to guide you. We don't follow signboards. One, they're in Ukrainian, and two, most of the signboards had been wiped clean because they didn't want the Russians to use those signboards and get to Kiev. So suddenly we noticed this one man running towards us and waving very frantically. And we said, "Kya ho gaya?" And usually your first instinct is don't stop. But this time we stopped. And he said, "Where are you going?" So we said, "We're going to Kiev. This is supposed to be the shortcut. This is what the Google map shows us." He says, don't you know this road is closed? I said, no, but we didn't see any signboard. And he says, those are anti-tank mines all over. This is the road that the Russians are expected to take to Kiev. And it's been mined, the entire road, that entire stretch is mined. That's why there are no vehicles, because everyone knows this road is mined. And I was like, dude, we could have died. But anyway, So we asked him, what's the other direction? He gave us direction, but remember, for 1 hour we'd been traveling, so we must have gone 150, 200 odd kilometers one way, same distance back. Fuel is being rationed in that country.
Yeah, right.
Right? We ran out of fuel. We stopped at a petrol pump. You know, they only gave us 20 liters. We thought in 20 liters we will reach Kiev. But we had to take another diversion because the bridge had been blown up. Now, bridges have been blown up in that country because the Ukrainians don't want Russians to advance, and it could be subversive activity. We still do not know. And here was the light beeping. Pitch dark night. Raining.
Horror stories.
And we run out of fuel. I mean, it's blinking. It's literally driving on fumes. And suddenly I noticed 3 cars on the other side of the road next to a petrol pump. So instinctively we took a U-turn and parked behind a car. And suddenly I noticed there are soldiers who come out with their weapons drawn.
Okay.
And we raised our hands and I said, Hinduski journalist, Indian journalist. My cameraman said the same. The soldiers who later became our friends said their apprehension was that we are terrorists or subversive elements, or we could be the enemy trying to shoot them. They were also coming back from combat. They were also going home. They had also almost run out of fuel. They required diesel. We required petrol. And the petrol pump had neither. So we stood there for about half an hour. They arranged some diesel and they said, we are not authorized to give you petrol, but since you are Indian journalists, and since one of them had come to India once in the past and had received great hospitality in India, he received great hospitality when he came to India. He gave me 20 liters of petrol and he did not charge us for it.
Awesome.
He said, I'm a soldier, I'm giving you petrol. Then he said, where are you going? We said, Kiev. So he said, follow me. My second fear was, कहीं यहाँ गाड़ी तो हमारी नहीं लूट लेंगे, जंगल में ले जाएंगे, गाड़ देंगे और हमारी गाड़ी लूट लेंगे.
It's all, complete mistrust, distrust. There's a
They
trust
didn't trust
deficit.
us, we didn't trust them. But the fact is, God works in mysterious ways. That 100-kilometer journey to Kiev from that point, we couldn't have covered that night. I mean, we had actually, both camera person Lalit Joshi and I, we had decided हम petrol pump पे गाड़ी कोने में लगाएंगे और रात भर यहीं सो जाएंगे, सुबह पेट्रोल मिलेगा तो सुबह जाएंगे. But in -3 degrees. That और चाहे गाड़ी का हीटर भी नहीं चला के सो सकते क्योंकि पेट्रोल ही नहीं है. खैर, so we followed them through at least 30 checkpoints where each time that officer got out of the car and said, these guys are with me, don't frisk them, let them come. And 2 o'clock at night, we finally got to Kiev. The next day, I bought the best scotch that's available in Ukraine at that point of time. At whatever, that chandler, that ship chandler kind of a guy we knew who was supplying, because liquor wasn't allowed during war. And we just went up to them, we'd made friends, and I said, I want to share this with you. And they said, no. I said, no, I absolutely insist. And, that's how bonds are made, even in conflict. Those guys were actually a gift from heaven for us.
I know, even in that, bad patch, you do meet humans who are like more human than others,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
And before we go, I have a very quick question for Gaurav, and that is about his blue jacket, because in the first few days, I would always look at the screen, and of course, you were in a very difficult position. So I can make a joke now that you're back and you're safe. I can kind of jocularly mention this, but I'd say, what is with his blue jacket? Why is he always on the screen with his blue jacket? So what was that blue jacket? You took only one jacket.
No, so I took only 3 jackets,
Okay.
and I would alternate, Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday, and then Thursday back to that, and then Friday back to that. So that's how I kept alternating. And when we are off camera, I'll tell you the story about the blue jacket. I'm not to blame. I wear what I get.
No, I can understand. And as I said, it's very difficult to laugh at this now that you're back safe home and with us. But at that time, we were like praying for Gaurav and, of course, our colleague Geeta Mohan and the camera person who was accompanying Gaurav. I think it was something that we felt sitting here, the kind of adrenaline and the kind of nervousness and anxiety that Gaurav and his team must have felt. So thank you so much for doing this for us, and also thank you for joining us for this chat and sharing your life experiences.
Not at all. But I think this is the best, and I've said this before, but I really want to say this. This is the best group to cover conflict for. this, the way we were backed up in any situation that we needed backup. There was a time when the government wanted everyone to leave because the situation was very tense. And I was at the Kiev railway station about to board a train, and most journalists had left by then. And I kept calling up Rahul. I said, no, one more day. We need to stay for another day. The company actually backed you up and said, okay, if it's your decision on ground, you want to stay another day. If you have, and they also worked on an exit strategy. I wonder how many companies would work on exit strategies of their team in a very difficult situation.
Yeah, I think that is commendable, and I think that's the confidence with which you go out and report, because you know that they have your back, and it's never going to be, you're not just going to be left to yourself wherever you are.
And there is something that at least somebody will make an effort to get you out of that situation, and when that situation is likely only to escalate in the weeks ahead, like even this conflict, God forbid, in case something happens, if Finland and Sweden also think that they're going to join the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, this conflict in Europe will only escalate on multiple fronts.
Right.
So that
and
is
May 9th is the day we are watching for
one part of this problem. The second part of the problem may just escalate in the weeks and months ahead.
We're just keeping our fingers crossed. We really do not want war. We are like peace-loving people, and as Indians, I think that's our philosophy all through. So thank you so much, Gaurav, for sparing this time, and thank you, viewers, for. Of course, we didn't take questions. We got so preoccupied with the anecdotal stuff. We didn't take questions, but we will again get Gaurav for you. And